Dallas Mayor Eric Johnson, thank you so much, and welcome back to Eye on Politics.
Thanks for having me.
So the cost of repairing Dallas City Hall, $329 million is the estimate. To rehabilitate it, to bring it up to today's standards, would cost $1 billion for the next 20 years. So where are you on this? Do you think that the city should move on from City Hall, find another location, and tear this building down, or should it stay?
Well, let's start with those numbers. I think the first thing the public needs to know is those numbers were provided to us by outside experts who, this is what they do for a living. You know, these folks are experts in assessing buildings and the condition of buildings like City Hall. And I believe that those numbers are accurate. I just want to say that right up front, because I do know that there's questions about whether or not these numbers have been inflated, or should we trust these numbers. I don't know where we'd get another set of numbers that would be more trustworthy. These companies that have looked at this are very reputable, and so I believe the numbers. That's number one. Number two, I'd say this is just the beginning of a process. Now that we know those numbers, before I could tell you whether or not I think we ought to move on from City Hall or not, I think now we need to move on to looking at more options. We need to explore all of our options. I really believe that our job as a council and as a city is to do the best thing that we can, for our taxpayers. Not a good thing, but the best thing with the taxpayers' dollars. So I think we need to understand what our options are in terms of staying in the building and repairing it. I guess there's the do nothing scenario that could, the status quo is always an option, and when you're making policy, that's an option. Making the repairs at those numbers you just stated is an option. Possibly moving to another building is an option, but we need to know what that looks like and the cost associated with that. So what I'm in favor of, Jack, is asking another set of questions now about what our options would be if we were to move on from the building, so we can make an educated and informed decision and do the best thing for the taxpayers.
And so that process is going on right now.
That's what the council just voted to direct the city manager to do. So we had a very long meeting that lasted 16 hours or so. And at the end of the meeting, the vote was taken that did in fact give the city manager the authority to go and explore these options. That's all that has happened up to this point. And I voted with the majority on the council to do that. And I think that was the right thing to do, was to direct her to go and find out what it would look like, what scenarios there are possibly out there for City Hall.
Now, in our last interview, you told me that this is not a great place as far as workplace environment at all. And you said it's a very expensive price tag. You thought it was going to be so much. So does that suggest that you are on the verge of saying, okay, let's move on from here?
Yeah, see, Jack, I have zero motives other than to do what's best for the taxpayers here. And so I'm telling you 100% point blank with full honesty and candor, I just want for our city government to be in a place where it can operate at the highest level, and I want us to be able to have a place where our employees can come and work and be comfortable and do their job. And I want to do what's best for Dallas from an economic development standpoint and put this building, this site, to the highest and best use it possibly can for the taxpayers. So we'll see what that ends up being once we have all the options on the table. But I will tell you, it is true that this building in its current condition is a not great place for the employees, not a great place to work.
So your bottom line is weighing the cost of moving versus staying?
So there's a couple things happening at once here, and so that is one aspect of this for sure, which is the question of where would be the best place for the physical location for our city government to operate from, whether that would be staying here or moving elsewhere. That's something we need to figure out, and we need to know what the options are to be able to answer that question. The other question would be this site where City Hall is located, is this the highest and best use of this site, especially considering what we are now dealing with in terms of the redevelopment potential for downtown Dallas? So that's another question we need to ask. So there's the cost, and I don't want to get too wonky about this, but there's the actual cost of the building itself to operate as a place for the government, and then there's the opportunity cost, which is a fancy way of saying what are you missing out on by doing the thing that you're doing? And so the question is, what are we missing out on, if anything, in terms of development potential for this part of downtown by having this be a government building versus it being something that's in private hands?
Well, you have three former mayors, Ron Kirk, Tom Leppert, Mike Rawlings, all want the city to leave this building because of the convention center is being redeveloped. Dallas College is putting $1 billion into its campus downtown, and they say that would invite billions of dollars. Then obviously everybody's been talking about, would this be a good place for a new Mavericks arena, hotels, it's an entertainment district, etc. Are they right?
I think they very well could be. And look, I will tell you that I think it's great that they are weighing in and sharing their opinions, and I think they're experienced, and they've led the city before. They talk to people, and I think it's great that they have an opinion about this. But I'm the person who's in charge right now, and I have to steward the city right now the best I know how. And my style of governing is to be very, very clear about what we are doing and making sure we have all the information that we need to make a good decision. And so I can't govern the city based on a hunch or instinct or gut feel. I have to look at data, which is why I'm very, very much in favor of what the council, including myself, just voted to do, which is part of what we authorize the city manager to do is to explore options for this site. So I would like to see what comes back and what they say this site could unlock. I mean, does my gut tell me that the best use of this part of downtown is not to be a government center, which I think is kind of a dated concept in and of itself, to have a cluster of government buildings right in the middle of what could be the most vibrant part of your downtown that by definition closes at 5 p.m. My gut tells me that's not a great idea. But I want the city manager to go through the exercise of actually exploring what private development options there would be. What interest would there be in this site? And if there are really great economic development opportunities for the city that would be unlocked by us leaving this site, I would be very, very compelled by that.
So let me ask you, because you touched on it before, you've had preservationists, a lot of residents down here very upset about this. And I even spoke with former Mayor Laura Miller, who told me she's opposed to demolishing City Hall. She says there's been a lack of transparency and riddled with self-interest, this whole process. And what do you say to those people who feel that way?
Well, I'm not sure why former Mayor Miller feels that way, because I can tell you that the process has been the definition of transparent. I mean, it's just not true that this process hasn't been transparent. You can go back to when I initially sent out a memo. I put it in writing. I distributed it publicly saying to the council, I want a committee to look at options for City Hall. So that was very transparent. The meetings that were called subsequent to my request were all open to the public. Discussions were had at those meetings. And every single thing that has happened has been compelled by council action. The getting the data from CBRE and AECOM, which are the companies that have done the studies about the cost associated with repairing City Hall, those were all requested by the council because the council, certain members of the council, didn't feel like we should just take the staff's numbers at face value. So you had certain council members who frankly didn't believe staff. They thought staff was inflating the numbers of what it would cost to repair City Hall. They clamored for a study. We got the best companies in the world who do this type of thing to study it. They came back with numbers that actually pretty much supported what staff said, and now they're questioning whether or not we should believe those numbers. So it looks like they just are interested in a study only so long as the study backs up what they believe. But the reality is all of this has taken place in a public setting, pursuant to council directives, and that's what we just had in this most recent vote, which is another set of council directives to the city manager to go and get more information. And she's going to have to report back that information to the full council, and we're going to have to make a decision. So I have no idea why Mayor Miller would say this is not being done in a transparent way. And as far as self-interest is concerned, I don't know who these self-interested people are. I mean, I don't know who she thinks is somehow self-dealing or whatever that phrase means, because I can tell you this, I'm the mayor of the city, and I'm not privy to any conversations or any discussions that are in any way, shape, or form connected with benefiting any individual. This has been a fact-finding process to figure out what is the best thing to do for City Hall and for our city from an economic development standpoint and from a governance standpoint, and to make the best use of our taxpayers' dollars. Period, full stop.
I want to ask you about the Dallas Morning News recently reported on these 5,000 emails, 5,000 pages of emails between city leaders. And they raised the question of how fully engaged are you at City Hall in this process?
Yeah, I'm fully engaged in everything that goes on around here. I've been fully engaged, and honestly, I'm going to decline to quibble with the Dallas Morning News about what I don't even know what these emails really that they have found say. I just know what I do every day, which is I wake up early in the morning, come to this building, and give this city everything I have. I work tirelessly on behalf of this city, and I do everything I possibly can to make sure this city is represented well here locally, nationally, internationally. I spend as much time as humanly possible advancing the interests of this city, including when it comes to topics like our downtown and the convention center and what we're going to do with City Hall. So I can't spend time going back and forth with any media outlet about some emails. I have no idea whose emails they are or whatever. That I don't have time for. What I do have time for is working on behalf of the people of the city, which is what I do every single day. And so I feel like we have to focus on the business at hand, and I have to let people. I guess there's always going to be people who are going to say things, but we have to actually be about the business of the people here, and that's what we're doing.
Have you had conversations with the Dallas Mavericks about staying in Dallas? When was the last time you talked to them? And it seems from what the reporting is that they want to stay in downtown.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll tell you this. So negotiations with our sports teams are, despite I think what some people think are actually economic development deals for us. We view those as economic development deals because we have to use taxpayer dollars in many cases to make these deals work. As a result, we don't engage in public conversations about what we've said. It's a negotiation. So we are trying to maintain the city's interest in these negotiations by not divulging our negotiating positions publicly. But suffice it to say, that keeping the Dallas Stars and keeping the Dallas Mavericks playing in the city of Dallas is one of the highest priorities of my administration, and it has been since I got here. This didn't creep up on anybody. Any idea that any of this is taking us off guard or catching us off guard or taking us by surprise is insane. Like, we've known for a long time when these leases are coming up and what people want. We've known for a long time that the Mavericks want, going back to when Mark Cuban owned the team, they want their own arena. We've known that for a while. So we've been talking, and we continue to talk to them about what we're both trying to accomplish, what they need as a team and what we need as a city. And I can tell you this, we are going to do everything we possibly can to make these deals work for both of those teams and keep them in the city. But I can't give you the specifics about what we talked about and when and where, but suffice it to say, I'm as engaged in that as a person could possibly be. So is our city manager, and we're doing everything we possibly can to make sure that they stay. And I'm confident that we will work this out, but I will tell you that there are a lot of moving parts to this, and we are just one part of this. There's a dispute between the Mavericks and the Stars that we're not party to, and that we have nothing to do with, that they're having to work through. But we are talking to both teams about what their needs are to keep them in the city, and that's what we're going to do.
Well, it seems like, the city of Plano said that it has had conversations with the Dallas Stars about moving to the Willow Bend Mall site in Plano.
Yeah, can't call me. I have no idea what I can't comment on that because I'm not
How
a part of that.
concerning is that?
Well, look, I'm a person who embraces competition, and I understand it. You know, I can't talk all the time about competing with our suburbs and how this is a competition and all the things that we need to do to be competitive, and then get my feelings hurt when people compete with us. I mean, that's what this is. Again, back to my point. These are for the fans of these teams. They think it's an emotional thing purely. It's just about, do you love the Stars or do you not? Do you love the Mavericks or do you not? These are economic development deals. This is about taxpayer dollars being used to try to generate a return for the taxpayers through an investment in a particular type of business. It's no different than when we try to incentivize one of these financial services companies to come to be a part of Y'all Street. It's the same thing. It's just it's a sports team involved instead of an investment bank, right? So no, it doesn't hurt my feelings that Plano is trying to compete with us for one of our teams. But those jerseys say Dallas on them, and I think these teams want to be in the big city, and I think they know that there's a cachet to playing in the big city, and this is the big dance. Dallas is the big dance, and I've said it before. There's a difference between being in the city and being in a suburb, and I think that these teams want to be here, and I think I welcome anybody's effort to compete with us, but I feel good about what we are going to be able to offer and what we're able to do to keep our teams here.
Dallas Mayor Eric Johnson, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Yeah.